And we are live. Hey, everybody. We are fashionably late by a couple of minutes, but I thought there's actually a lot of suspense for this one. It's a lot of people have sent me messages, and a lot of people are asking where they can watch it and how to watch it, and whether the replay will be available. But welcome. We'll give it a few minutes for people to jump on live and to start watching. But I'd love to introduce you all to a former patient and now a really, really good friend of mine, Nico. Obviously, I've written the post yesterday and what he's all about and what he's had to go through. But today, we'll ask him all the interesting questions, and we'll get a a better idea of what it's like to be in the regimen and what it does to your body, your brain, your nervous system, your immune system, and how you can recover from something like that. Nico, how are you today?
Yeah. Well, relatively awesome. Like, like in the scheme of things, I don't know, man. Like when you've seen the depths of hell, anything above that is pretty good. So, yeah, relatively good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, why don't we start from the beginning? Because it's a long story.
Yeah.
When did you join the forces at any capacity, and what did that progression look like for you?
Yeah. So I I joined the Navy when I was 17 and 10 days old as an electronics technician. Found myself studying engineering pretty intensely. Like probably bit off way more than I could chew from my education. You know, I don't know capacity at that time. Grinded through that, but basically a few months into it, I kind of really knew what I wanted to do, and I always did. And basically, I'm like, hey, if I'm going to be in the military, I'm going to be the top warrior that I can be. So, other than being like pretty, generally laughed at throughout that entire experience of being transparent about that, I didn't really care. I just kept training. So I trained the whole time I was in the Navy, like running around laps of the flight deck to equate to 20 kilometers in the heat of the Philippines with the ship going up and down. I kind of had like this just relentless pursuit, but definitely grossly overtraining to get there. I then got to a point where I then was able to attempt like the Special Forces pre-selection, which is like a test. So I was able to do that, contrary to the fact that my ship sabotaged me for doing it several times, just in case I passed. They'd lose it. They'd lose someone on the ship. They were like, but so be it. Kept going. Eventually paid for my own flight back on one of the occasions to do it. Due to the overtraining, which was kind of fine at this time, I was able to, I passed successfully at that. They brought me across to the army to undergo a whole bunch of training. Um, and then this is when injuries kind of started. I got a hernia. I had a hernia the size of a golf ball. And I remember I was doing my infantry training when I come across, and I remember just jamming in this hernia the whole time I was walking, just like jamming it back into my body. It was like pretty agonizing. But as much as I could, I would do that, or I would use like a jock strap. So my body was already starting to fall apart because I was training twice a day and like super intense and every day. So it wasn't really, I just didn't, I just like, hey, the more the merrier. I pushed through, and then eventually I did I did actually did our sort of regular special forces selection post hernia without all the training that was supposed to prepare me for it. I didn't recover, and I was in a gross amount of fatigue. So as soon as I started, I encountered fatigue like quite significantly. Through the just will of the gods, I was able to get to the end of it. And they're like, "You don't have enough experience." I'm like, "I could have told you that before I started. In fact, I did tell you that, and I wanted to delay it, get more training, and then." But anyway, so then I got sent to an infantry unit, which was which was great, but also at the same time, it was like not my objective. So it really kind of crushed me a bit, but just sort of, swallowed it, carried on. Um, I then in the infantry unit, I managed to, just because sheer attention to detail and will, I was promoted pretty quickly and also given like gross responsibility very fast as well. But I was only in there for about a year before I did the selection for the SAS. Kind of just took everything that I could possibly get and went hell for leather. And at this stage, I was 21, so still guys kind of laughing at you, still like you're just wasting your time. Because the next oldest person was 26, and the average age is about 29 to do selection. So I got in, got through selection, pretty beat, pretty exhausted after that, and then had to start. Like they really went all out to crush us. It was one of the most hectic experiences of my life, to be honest. Absolutely destroying. I remember at one point there, in the last 10 days, you've got like for 5 of them, you've got to walk like 30 kilometers a day with carrying about somewhere like around 50 kilograms. But you're already destroyed at this time. Like you've got no reserves, no energy. We've probably lost about 10 kilograms at this point of body weight. And we didn't really have it because you had to be athletic to start. So you kind of look like a sick greyhound, but I had like 9 injuries. So at this point here, my body's starting to show its cracks. Anyway, but I got through the next 18 months training, including a broken leg from skydiving, broken leg, foot and ankle, causing some problems with squats, the lower back and the neck. And they start to come to light later. And then proceeded to have after that, to have a pretty epic career, multiple deployments to Afghanistan, and just back-to-back deployments as well. I was ruthlessly pursuing combat deployments, and it basically added up. And then by the end of my career, I was just they say you finish life skidding in the finish line into the grave in a broken, tattered body because you don't need it. Well, I'd done that at 30. And I was shattered, completely shattered, like job list some injuries. I could probably
Well, let's we've got a few people watching live, but they haven't told us. So one, guys, if you're watching, please like the video, comment, and tell us who you are and whether you can hear us. But let me back up. So at 21, you got into 21, you passed.
yeah.
You got into. So does that make you the youngest person to ever get into SAS if the next oldest was 26?
No, so not the average. The next oldest for my selection was 26, and then the average age is about 29. Since one of my mates was 38.
Wow.
And he's also the oldest to do it. So because you just at that age, you just good luck. You don't really stand a chance.
So for context for people, think of yourself when you were 21. Like I think of myself when I was 21. And to do something like that is pretty epic. And these days, Nico, you've been out of Australia for a while, but there's a really popular TV show now called SAS.
Mm.
And they take a bunch of celebrities and they take them through different courses and and it's become kind of romanticized. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on today, because I don't think it's very romantic. Like I've seen some of the posts that you put up, and you're a really, really good writer and you capture it well. But you wrote a quote once that said, "There is no hunting like the hunting of man."
Mm.
And
Yeah, that's
that
Hemingway.
is,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Hemingway. And it's like, and for those who have hunted, man, like nothing there ever thereafter will suffice. Something like that. But yeah, it's
So
pretty brutal. Like you've got some post service. You've got some. You're not just worried about physiological, psychological injuries. You've also got some, like, I guess, soul level injuries to deal with as well, right?
yeah,
Where you've had to be a certain person in order to, I guess, be that person and survive and make sure everyone around you survives as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
What I want people to kind of understand is that, and I talk about this when I talk about athletes, they think that athletes are healthy, but there is a certain point, like exercise is different to training.
Mm,
Okay. Very, very different. And at 21 years old, to be selected to then do that gruesome 18 months, I assume the training's worse than any mission you've ever done.
the selection kind of, oh yeah, definitely. Selection kind of like fully broke me. I remember at the end of it, we were so gaunt. Like I had 9 injuries right in the selection. I was hobbling, right?
At 21.
At 21, like I was pretty broken at afterwards. Like there was a point of selection where others could rest, I couldn't, because I was moving too slow because I had to hobble the whole way. So I had to hobble like 130 kilometers and climb 5 mountains for 5 days there. But I wasn't able to stop for lunch. I had to like pull it out of my pocket and eat while I hobbled because I didn't. My leg was, one of my hamstring had gone. I was developing another hernia because I can identify that. But yeah, it was kind of definitely took its weight and crushed me.
So you hadn't even been deployed yet, and you were already 9 injuries deep at 21 and already fatigued, feeling the
Yes,
first signs of fatigue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, like before that, before on the previous selection, I'd already hit the wall of fatigue there where I'm like, all right, what's going on? And actually, the saving grace for me was, believe it or not, before the SAS selection, I got injured. I injured my lower back, and I couldn't run, and I couldn't do upper body, and I learned how to nap, and I learned how to sleep, and I learned how to rest, and that was 8 weeks before selection. And if I hadn't injured myself, I never would have passed. So
What do you mean learnt how to nap and learnt how to sleep?
I didn't rest before that. I just kind of kept going like all the time. Like there was a point there before selection, I was training 5 to 7 times a day, and as well as doing whatever the infantry or military demanded of me.
What was your sleep schedule like? Or was there even a sleep schedule?
Yeah, no, like by the time I got home, I would cook myself another meal because at this point I was eating like I used to joke it's like first, second, third breakfast, first, second, third lunch, and first, second, third dinner. And then
Yeah.
I'd walk around with a box of Special K because it was high in protein, like a huge box, and just eat from that at all times because I just needed to put nutrients in me just because my body was demanding so much. Um, but yeah, it was yeah, it's I don't know, it was like just stupid amount of training, and I took myself to a point of fatigue in the first selection, let alone the second. Um, where it was kind of like I was aware I was broken. I actually had someone's mum who was a naturopath go, "You need to take this, iron, vitamin B. You need to take this, and you need to take this for your adrenal glands because they're shot." So that helped significantly. But doing that for about a year. But realistically, the injury before selection was my saving grace. If I hadn't injured myself, I wouldn't have passed because I
Yeah.
never used to nap. I used to get home at like 7:30 at night, cook third dinner, eat that, and I would literally often pass out on the lounge before I could even turn the TV on or anything, or even get into bed, and then wake up at like 5 or 6 a.m. and ride to work. And my ride was up and down hills for about 10 kilometers with probably a pack of stuff that I had to take that day. And that was kind of like my shortest training session of the day.
Yeah.
Mm.
So training looked uh really intense, but you were 21, you had some fuel coming in. So usually for people like autoimmune conditions and things like colitis, Crohn's, and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, they're progressive conditions. So they don't hit you at the beginning. You start to see the first kind of red flags, but you generally will push through, especially if you're uh operating on high cortisol, high adrenaline. Like you had to get your fuel from somewhere. So for you, it was just willingness to fucking be the best warrior you can.
Oh yeah, yeah. But that was
And
for everyone else. I gotta say that anyone who passed selection, we all concurred that the determining factor was those who truly wanted it.
yeah,
Like, because the most athletic people went in about day 3. It was like 21 days, right? But about day 3 and at best day 5, because once you took food and nutrients and all these things from them, and they were left with just their psychological state, they weren't capable of continuing.
yeah.
So they all quit. That throw in the towel.
For the people who don't know, and I'm sure like everyone knows by now because it's been so popularized, but what's the difference between SAS and say a general kind of unit?
Um, So basically, I guess the difference is like the regiment is responsible for complex problem solving at a strategical level on behalf of the government. So when there's a problem that the government absolutely can't solve, it's extremely high level, then the regiment is kind of becomes the ultimate problem solver for
Yeah,
that. And then we can use for a range of stuff, below that, whether intelligence, reconnaissance, um, direct action. Like we did a lot of in Afghanistan. We did a lot of targeting, high level, medium level targets, which is like your Taliban commanders, leadership and whatnot. Basically, denying them ability to live or operate on the battlefield, which makes it really hard for anyone to want to take leadership roles, which is good. And it also creates absolute utter confusion amongst the ranks when they don't have leadership. So we would constantly utilizing multiple levels of intelligence, um, land at moment's notice without any prior planning to assault these villages or compounds or portions of the city or whatever. And obviously they're very dangerous because these guys like to fight to their death, and they have soldiers around them and protection and whatnot. And it's you know it's so we to be honest. And then we've got counterterrorism and anti-terrorism, which, and hostage rescue abroad and nationally, and a vast array of intelligence options. Like it's really quite impossible to even explain it, because even when I was in the infantry and I thought I knew, I didn't know. So I can't imagine what the difference between a civilian and myself, what I think is normal now, would know.
Yeah. So the most impressive part for me is the intelligence part. I remember you explaining to me kind of how some of the missions would go and the operations, and so not only is your body required to take the beating, but your brain is constantly on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
disproportionate,
yeah,
ridiculous. I can't tell you the ridiculous amount of responsibility that was on my shoulders, and you're making decisions that aren't just like soldier on soldier. You're making real world strategic, government level consequences for every decision you make. Um, we call it in the units like a daily renewable contract. Like if you were to screw up, you're out, no matter what your past achievements were. So it's pretty intense just to even stay in the unit. And yeah, man, it's like that intelligence level of. I'm talking more about like, which I can go into um, for security and secrecy reasons, but that level there is pretty intense. And on top of that, like just from an intellectual point of view, like the guys around me are like will still probably be the smartest, clued on guys I'll ever meet in my life. Like literally, like and you could have a I know one sergeant was like a rocket scientist we used to joke about, but like guys are a mixed bag of extremely educated people, and but that still wouldn't stack up against the way that they carry themselves or anyone else carried themselves in the unit, right? Like they were truly responsible to basically perform a multiple of tasks simultaneously. And we used to call it like jack of all trades, master of none, because really when you're expected to be a jack of like 80 trades, it's really hard to quite master them, but somehow you just, you dig into the memory there and go for it. And for instance, like we were doing one mission where we had, talking to, trying to, like an air traffic controller on the ground. And I was trying to do that. We had militia, we had multiple layers of militia, we had partnering forces in all different spectrums around the battlefield. We had, mortar teams. We had helicopters off the back that were listening into intelligence information to find leadership talking over the radio, and they would fly overhead and they would target different areas, and attack helicopters dropping bombs, and we're literally clearing villages of Taliban. We had so much going on, and you're kind of required to do all this simultaneously. Like you got to coordinate everything on the battle space whilst simultaneously clear buildings and whatnot, and coordinate the overhead and even dogs on the ground. It was quite ridiculously complex. Like I can't. My brain hopefully never has to operate at that level again to live or die.
yeah.
So yeah.
So I just want people to, because I'm looking at it from a health perspective, and I'm going, okay, the brain require. So you can do something that's physically stressful, but when something's physically stressful plus mentally complex plus there are severe dire consequences, you're operating at a really high level of stress. For most people, like we talk about, I always talk about resiliency and metabolic reserve, right? So resiliency is your ability to, from a health perspective, your ability to rebound from acute stress. How quickly can you recover? And then metabolic reserve is how many reserves do you have to withstand long-term stress? How many reserves? How long can you do that? And so you did that essentially from the age of 20 to 30. You did it for a decade.
Mm.
And there wasn't much time. I'm assuming like there wasn't much time to rest. Uh, once you're deployed, it's constant fight or flight nervous system mechanism. So we've got the physical injuries, which are like your hardware, so the broken leg, the hernia, but really they're the easier ones to fix because at least we can diagnose them, see them, fix them, surgery, physical rehab, you're good.
Mm.
It's the software, the physiology, the stuff like the chronic fatigue, the fibromyalgia, the viruses, the bacteria you would have picked up, the depression, right? That's the stuff that's more complex and probably would have taken longer to develop, but also much longer to fix.
By far. I used to tell people, like in the stacking order, I said, I don't even care about my broken injuries at this point. Like I was just like, did I find a way to work around them in the gym, to strengthen certain parts, change certain techniques and things so that I can, like, because it got to a point I couldn't turn my steering wheel anymore because my shoulder was just grinding. So I found a way to kind of around that. And I just do what I can. Now that's fine. And I mean, it's like, it's what's pertinent to you, right? So my favorite quote is, "Nothing that grieves us can be considered little. By the eternal laws of proportion, a child's loss of a doll and a king's loss of a crown are events of the same size." It's like Mark Twain. So if a broken shoulder is, your problem, that's fine. It's what's big to you and what's the biggest thing to you and psychologically traumatizing to you in some way or another, right? So, but for me, it got to a point, well, yeah, the injuries are pretty bad. But it was like physiologically, I was crushed, and mentally, I was crushed. And I kind of break them into three categories also, although I feel like physiological and mental is very much intertwined. And I could get mental under control so long as my physiological didn't come crashing down. And when I got sick, I would get sick for like 7 months and keep spiraling. Like I'm talking back to back sicknesses, bedridden, like good luck trying to do any employment at all, like or work or anything, or even have aspirations at this point. Because you've like, if anything's shown you after several years of that, you're kind of just like, well, like, I'm not sure this is going to end or how it's going to end if it does. It was pretty brutal. Like the mental was definitely a catastrophic shit show. Like I was just like trying really hard not to die for a while there, but that got pretty intense. I couldn't drive in a straight line anymore, and I was constantly like couldn't pay attention. I couldn't like it was I just didn't have gross or complex motor skills with my hands anymore. Yeah, it was that got pretty bad. Obviously, pretty dark. But the physiological was the one that was just completely incapable of overcoming. Like it was getting to the point where it was like, like I had my mental health pretty well in check, and I could tell the difference between having depression as a sickness and just misery due to circumstance. And the misery was like just like it was just it wasn't depression. It was just like I don't know when or if this will ever end, and my entire days are existing in the hope that I someday don't just exist. So straight up, I'm going through the motions of life to give me the best opportunity to heal, and not successfully healing. Like every day, I'm slowly seeing myself just get worse and worse, or catch the next viral infection or bacterial infection. It would just be back-to-back infections, and between that, it's twitching eyes because my nervous system shut down. Really, in the hierarchy of things, I've put physiological for me because what's big to me, what I don't, we don't really get to decide. It's what our soul or our mind holds close. So physiological, then probably mental, and then physical. The physical injuries. That became very obvious to me.
Yeah. And for people to understand, when you reached out to me, we got connected through a mutual friend years ago now. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. And we started working together. And without getting into all the private kind of stuff, what we found was that you had a whole heap of viruses. Like you had a host of viruses that you had picked up along the way, and some bacterial infections. Now, what happens, guys, with these bacterial infections and viruses is the viruses and the bacteria don't want to kill you, because if you die, they die. They have no host to live in anymore. Okay, so they keep you alive. However, they disrupt all of your natural kind of biological, your optimal mechanism. So there are specific bacteria, for example, in children with autism that are in higher levels than they are with neurotypical children. And when we treat that bacteria in some children with autism, they become neurotypical. They start speaking again. They start doing things as a normal child would, right? Not that they're not normal, but I mean neurotypical from like a brain perspective. So in an adult, this is constantly causing disruption in the nervous system, it's challenging your immune system, and the immune system isn't very smart. It's not very intelligent. So what happens is it causes a instant inflammatory response to that bacteria or that virus because it's an outside pathogen. And then it causes another inflammatory response in response to the initial inflammatory response. So it's like I call it like a bug in the software. It's like we never really fixed that bug. So inflammation causes more inflammation, which causes more inflammation, which causes more inflammation, which causes more inflammation. And it's just this, we call it like a cytokine storm. It's just it's a cascade of reactions. So you are living pretty much chronically inflamed, trying to fix the initial thing, but the initial thing is so far removed. And then it just, mounted on top of each other, not to mention the physical injuries and that that level of inflammation.
Mm.
Now, when you're running that hot, I call it like you're on fire, right? Eventually, that inflammation crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it starts to affect the way you feel and the way you think, and it affects your endocrine system, and so your mood is lower. Like, you cannot be chronically inflamed and be happy. It doesn't. You can't have those two things coexist. So it will definitely have a major effect on your mental health. So we were connected, and then we went through some protocols, and we got some results, but we didn't get anything extraordinary. Like, we were doing nutritional therapies, we were using supplements, we were doing many different tests. I think you've worked with pretty much everyone. Like, you've done endocrinologists, doctors all around the world.
I'd done so many doctors, I'd lost faith in doctors. Actually, I basically didn't have any respect for almost all doctors anymore, because I realized once it became complex, they didn't want to deal with you anymore. It's like, and that was a bit of a wake up call. It was like, oh shit, all right. So yeah, the journey crushed me. Like, essentially, by the time I got to you, I was too far gone. I was in the decline. But what you were able to do to triage me was significant. Like, just
Mm,
things that I wouldn't think of. Like, I'm in the mountains. You're like, Nick, you can't be in the mountains. The altitude is killing you. In fact, it's the opposite of a hyperbaric chamber, which is what we're going to recommend. And then I went into a hyperbaric chamber that, like, but you can't do it too frequently because your body will start thinking it has an immune system, and it doesn't. And it'll try fighting things, and it will fail, and you'll get sicker. So I was in this, like, just quagmire. And then it was like, now you need sunlight every day for immunity. So I was chasing sunlight every day. So I had to change where I lived. I had to, do a whole bunch of things, drinking less water, finding the balance of water, moving things from my food, which I'd always been extremely disciplined, evidently. Like, my ability to diet pretty well has always been for what was at the time understood to be healthy, right? Like, obviously it
mm,
keeps changing as we get more and more aware of certain things and effects on the body, but extremely disciplined, like ridiculously. So that wasn't really such a huge problem there. Although there is certain aspects around that where it's like, where you start to just live in order to survive, you don't really have any passion for life, right? Like, everything you do and every decision you make is this going to make me worse? So you kind of become a little bit, which adds stress. So you've just added stress to an already stressful system, which just definitely does not help. So it's like, now it's kind of more about finding substitutes for things that I don't have in my diet or whatever. But even then, it was like, with the work we did, it was, you took me on at a point where I was basically in a decline that wasn't really going to come out of. It was, and evidently I didn't. It just kept going that way. It did stop it for a period of time, or hold like as triage, and slowed down the process,
mm.
which in the end probably saved me, because, as I was going to say, that the stem cells that I received in the end, they saved me by far. But I would never have got to that point. Like, I was a couple of months off dying for sure. Like, definitely, I would say 2 months, but could have been like more like a month. I was definitely on my way out.
I remember the point to where we said, okay, you approached me and you said, hey, I want to do stem cells, and man, go for it. And I remember the cost, and I remember it was about 20,000 US at the time, and you weren't. It was difficult because it was a risk. It was a asymmetrical bet. It was like, if this works, I will get really good results, but if it doesn't, I lose 20 grand and potentially my life.
Yeah. So the Christ, man, being disabled for a long period of time, doom and gloom in the world, and just trying to survive, not being able to work and whatnot, kind of makes you count for every dollar a little bit more, because it's like, as you dip in, you're like, I have no way of making this again. So for me, it kind of became a decision maker for me just to throw it in. It ended up costing me about 25K, and then about an extra 5K for basically for the transit and the things involved. It was a big decision, but at this point, things were so bad, so sort of miserable, or whatever's big to you again from that
Mm.
point. Things were so dire for me that it was like, well, what the fuck have I got to lose? Because you can't take this to the grave. But it was a bit of a decision where I'm like, I don't have much more money after this if this doesn't work. But then if it doesn't work, I'm probably not going to survive. So it was a it became a pretty easy decision to make. Like I
Yep.
made very much a very easy decision where I'm like, who dares wins? Let's go for it. Because I tell you what, I'm not winning as it stands. I'm straight up dying. But yeah, that was that was the hurdle for me. And now I look back at it, it was like the single greatest spend of money I've ever spent in my life. It's like
Yeah.
I can't put I'm literally 70% of what I used to be. Like, some things are permanent injuries, but literally like not getting sick and having that is like, Jesus Christ, the quality of life, my ability to like pursue goals and wealth and stability and whatever I want, it now exists. I didn't have that before. So yeah, take my money. Christ, what do I care? It's all pretend anyway. And apparently governments are just printing it like it's nothing.
Well, at the time, you went from being on the decline to now being on the incline, because the way stem cells work is the longer, like they work over time, right?
Mm.
So you've been improving since. So what was you well, like, where do we start? What was the first step? Like, you found out about stem cells and you would have done your research, and where did you go? What made you decide to go to that particular place? Like, how did that all happen?
So it
How
was
did you even find out about stem cells?
so I heard the conversation between Dr. Neil Riordan, Mel Gibson, and Mel Gibson's father on the Joe Rogan podcast in 2018, I believe, January 2018, sometime around there.
Mhm.
And that kind of planted the seed. I'm like, oh, this is Christ, if it worked this well for his dad, and his dad was basically imminently dead,
Yeah.
organ failure, gone blind, hearing, can barely walk, just, given a few months to live. And, if you've got Mel Gibson money, you're just like, well, okay, going for it. And
Yeah.
just threw money at it and got his dad an extra, I think maybe around a decade. But his dad, I remember after it was like, could see again, could hear again, his organs healed, blood supply, flow, walking properly, and even getting erections that he hadn't had in like however long. But it was like that there, I'm like, oh Christ, well, if it's going to work for that. And then I started hearing more and more, reading more and more just in some literature, and it was kind of like a tiptoe towards it. And then as this went on, I was obviously just progressively getting worse. Like, to put in perspective, the first year out of the unit, I was sick 10 months out of 12 months. But I'm not just talking like fatigued. I was fatigued the whole 12 months, right? Like shattered, like had a permanent lung infection for a year and a half. So like just things I just thought were normal at this point. Literally, I wake up in the morning every day coughing up yellow and just thought that was, hey, this is life.
Yeah.
Um, and basically yeah, I'd kind of heard more and more. And then the second year out, I think it was about 8 months. And then I was about like kind of, I guess, 7, 8 months the next year, the first 3 years before I got stem cells. But I was noticing, just not only was it like wearing me down more, but I was far sicker. Like that was like 8 months I was with bacterial or viral infections, probably because I'm running out of viruses to catch, honestly. I
You
didn't,
you gave me one. I could tell
yeah,
that story.
yeah, my whole immune system just
Yeah.
like caught everything and anything. And if it, it's just juggling them all. So the other 4 months out of that year, like were just as unbearable, but I didn't have a direct viral infection or vomiting on the toilet or something to equate to it. But it was like, my right eye would permanently twitch because my nervous system had shut down. So as I was reading more and more of this literature, I was becoming way more and more desperate to save my life, right? So
By the way, can I jump in there, Nico? Sorry to interrupt, but just to explain to people, it's even worse when you have infections and don't have diarrhea and fevers and and all the symptoms. That's even worse. That means you've gone beyond the point of your immune system being able to mount a response. So when you get an infection, a good immune system, one that is balanced, will create a fever, will create diarrhea, will create these symptoms that none of us like, but really we need it because that's what's fighting the actual infection. What happened with you is kind of like what you guys would do in the regiment. It would sneak up on you, and you would become the host for that bacteria and virus, and your immune system wouldn't even put up a fight. It couldn't put up a fight. It didn't
mm,
have the resources to do it.
mm,
So this bacteria and these viruses found this amazing host that they wanted to keep just alive. They didn't want you to die, but also your immune system never put up a fight. So like, what a nice environment. I'm just gonna stay here. I like it here.
And they did. I was stacking up. We were getting tested at one point there, and it was just like, well, the major ones are the following, and it just, like dengue, Ross River,
Epstein Barr.
and just the ones that kind of hang on permanently that ruin your life, and just
Yeah.
usually just one of them will do it. But like I had, so towards the end of my career, right? Like I had my last deployment in 2013. I come home just before Christmas. Instead of rest, which I really needed at this point, I was broken. They threw us straight into like counterterrorism training, and that was kind of like the feather on the donkey's back. It broke it. Camel's back or whatever. So yeah, it ruined me. And then I remember taking 2 weeks leave, and I went to travel to take some downtime, and I could not stop sleeping. Came back, and I just, for the first time, just felt this just level of exhaustion that was kind of permanent. And I'd had it from that in the past, right, when I was younger, but I was able to somewhat recover from it. But this time it was like, I truly felt it. And then I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue, and then I took some time off. During that time off, I developed heavy, severe mental health problems. So it wasn't really time off. I tried to really take some proper time to recover. Long service leave we call in Australia, where you take multiple months off to, that you accrued after 10 years of leave to basically, rest and chill out. So then and then as it went on, it turned into another diagnosis of chronic fatigue again, which I started to work out with doctors. I'm like, why do you keep diagnosing me? Why aren't you ever going to pitch a solution? And it was like they're just really good at diagnosing, and that's all they really care to do. It's like, oh, here's a title, there you go, you're welcome. I'm like, I don't want a title, I want solutions. So then I got fibromyalgia, and I got all the mental health stuff sort of diagnosed, and that was a catastrophe. And then afterwards, it's like didn't really receive. I got out of the unit, and because I had to, I couldn't do it anymore. And then I basically just kept acquiring and accruing more and more sicknesses, and it turns out I had these multiple viruses before I even left from different tropics of the world. And it turns out I tested positive to them before I left, and they never told me. They never actually read the report and told me.
Wow.
So I didn't really know what was wrong with me or properly understand it. So that was an experience that just kind of led me down the path of the just snowballing situation, health situation. But eventually I was tracked all the stem cells, and to answer your question from earlier, it's like I tracked all the stem cell stuff, and just in conversations and media, and just genuine conversations with people who had immense success, and started reading reports and all these different things on it. And it became, a pretty worthy standout option, and made more sense to me because I did have to take cortisol because my body stopped producing cortisol completely. I had to start
left.
yeah. Which threw things out of whack. A whole bunch of stuff out of whack. It was a nightmare scenario, right? But eventually it was like, well, one of my good friends here in Colombia goes, hey, I've got a guy here that's connected to a clinic to a stem cell clinic. I'm like, oh, didn't know there was stem cells here. And it was just kind of became a little bit serendipitous to go through the conversation with him, the conversation with the doctor there in the clinic. And just, I felt like, for anyone, I know Colombia very well. So for anyone who doesn't know Colombia, imagine it's dirt roads and chickens, and you come here and you're like, this could be anywhere else in like Australia. It's not that at all. The whole country as a whole, yeah, of course you'll find dirt roads and chickens, just like you find dirt roads and chickens in Australia. But it's like, it's much nicer than I think you're imagining. People are way more well dressed than Australians. It's definite. Probably not a hard bar, but I went through their clinic, and really at this point, doctors had failed me, and that doctor was great. She kind of pointed me in the right direction because we've had 100% success with every patient that's come here with autoimmunity. She goes, I can't promise you anything, but she goes, but I truly believe that it will help you significantly, if not fix it. And just her confidence in it from one doctor to actually offer a solution after all these years was like, all right, let's go. And she wasn't trying to sell in any capacity, right? She's like, I'm not going to tell anyone that comes in here that they're going to have success if they're not going to. Yeah. So anyway, and I committed, but I had to commit, obviously, pretty significant financial decision. I had to wait months because of the backlog of patients. There's a huge backlog, in this industry. Like and if you can find a slot soon, that's literally was half my battle. I wish I could have done it the next day, especially knowing what I know now. I would have, all right, I won't go home until you've treated me. But I had to do mine in stages of 3 months. I had to do like a portion in the IV in the blood. And then 3 months later, I had to come back and do a portion in the spinal fluid, and then another portion in the blood. And then 3 months after that, I came back and did the other three. And quite frankly, I just got it in time for COVID. But if I hadn't, like knowing COVID, and I've had COVID, yeah, I'd probably almost definitely would have COVID. I'm one of those people that would have gone to hospital at least with COVID, maybe died.
Yeah.
Like just getting like it was, kind of. I know my health at this point. I'm not a hypochondriac. If anything, I downplayed it too much, which probably put me in the dangerous position I'm in. But was in. But yeah, definitely COVID would have probably finished me off had I caught it.
Yeah. Why don't we read what injuries and illnesses you were diagnosed with? So for people who they almost became like bumper stickers for you. I remember we just
Yeah.
car with bumper stickers. So let's read some of them. I've got here multiple permanent injuries and broken limbs, broken teeth, bruxism, tinnitus, hearing loss, PTSD, major depression, major anxiety, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, dengue fever, Ross River fever, Epstein-Barr, shutdown of nervous system, permanent lung infections, arthritis, autoimmunity, consistent viral and bacterial infections, etc., and many more. Like, what didn't you have? I even think you had pre-Crohn's. You were just never diagnosed with it.
Yeah, it got to a point where I just wouldn't go to doctors anymore because they diagnosed me with something else and no solution. And it's like it becomes a point there where you look at because I had to have a list for dealing with Veterans Affairs so they would treat me for conditions and then fight for some of those conditions so that they would be like, no, you're paying for that yourself. Even though they were, like I remember I had to fight, I think, for a broken tooth that was literally smashed in with a rifle. And they were like, no, this isn't on us. I'm like, how the fuck is this not on you? Like, I don't know how you draw it any more conclusive. I don't know where else I'm getting a rifle to my teeth smashed in. Yeah, there was definitely, I just stopped going to doctors because what was I going to do? They were going to give me another diagnosis, and what was that going to do for me? So it became pointless, very much so. So yeah, there was definitely more injuries, right? And that's not even, leaving them really going into the physical, because as I said, in my hierarchy of needs to recover, they just didn't stack up against the other stuff.
Yeah. So you did the first treatment of IV stem cell, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did you first start to feel different?
So I actually took it, kept declining for about 2 months. It was getting pretty dire. So
what do you mean kept declining?
Because it doesn't work overnight, right? It's not magic.
Oh, yeah.
You're really healing at the core of a human being, right? Like you're not slapping band-aids and triage medicines and pharmaceuticals shit at something to block what's going on, right? Or like you block one thing and then that causes this blockage over here, which so you're just chasing yourself in a circle or whatnot, right? Which for me it was like 2 months I still kind of kept declining, just going, well, God, I hope this works. But this was the point where it was like, 2 more months of that and I was done. I was dead for sure. I was not going to be alive. And I'm pretty confident to say that, knowing the situation. And then all of a sudden, like clockwork, just started like overnight. There was this transition in about 7 to 10 days where I just started going up. I just or not down and slightly up. And then it just grew over the next 10 months into a parabolic curve of stability, to the point where I'm like, Christ, I'm at like, I think I was like, there was a point where I was at 40% when I finished my treatment. And I was like, because it keeps working, right? My last day of treatment, it keeps working. I'm like, even if I just had this is worth living for. This is, I'll take that. I'm like, straight up, that's you. Yeah, I'm Christ, man. I'm like 40% was a total victory, because it wasn't just 40% at this time. It was 40%. And I was aware I was still getting better, because it was like before I was able to identify where I was declining, because there's no such thing as plateau, right? We're either going up or down in whatever aspect of our lives. That's plateau is just that fractionary moment of transition. And this was for me, this was a case of, I was aware that I was stable, which was a huge win for me. Like I hadn't had this for 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know much about stem cells, we'll be educating them more. But essentially, they have the capacity to turn into any tissue type. So they take time. They take sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months. But you're right; they heal over time. They are at the root of healing. So you did the first treatment, you got 40% better, and then you did the second treatment, which was a spinal.
So I actually, because I was so like the doctor even told me before she started, she goes, Nick, you might not even notice anything until the second treatment. I'm just going to warn you out on that. She goes, just because she goes, you were so far in the hole that it's like, this will be working on stuff that we don't even know is wrong with you as a priority in your body because it just kind of, you know, for the nature of God, it just kind of goes to where it needs to go, right, and does its thing.
Mm,
So like people might even be like, oh, I got injected here or whatever, but it might not have had a significant change. It's like, well, the stem cells went somewhere where they thought was more of a priority in your body. So
yeah.
count your blessings for that. So I actually no, I felt 40% at the end of my treatment protocol. It's how bad I was. Like I was living in the proper, if there was a video game, I was living in the red or the phone battery. I was like I was about 3% of life. Um, so, it took a while to really stop that going down and then to come back up. So it wasn't until probably my last treatment, which was about 7 months or so after my first, that I really I got to, that 40%. I bet that, to be honest, it was just 10% in incline was was significant for me. Like that was a life changer for me. The 40% was like, this is amazing. And then, as I say now, I'm like, it's 70%. I'm like, this is awesome. I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. Like they take my money. Like the quality of life that I have as a result is like worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I literally can't put a price on it. Now I've seen it and I've experienced it. I felt it. It's like my duty to get this, get the message out there. And not just that, um, I'm trying to get it accessible to all veterans for free because can't afford
Why not?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't. You're looking at someone like me who's, and there's other people this should be paid for by government or whatnot, right? They broke them. You buy them now, or some entity, right? Like I want them to get access. They've never had the opportunity to have like a proper income, right? They're in service. They're not getting paid significant amounts. And if you're asking someone who's got like like a family to go, hey, I want to take 30K off the mortgage and go throw it at this. It's like it's a pretty tall order for someone who's disabled and can't actually earn money for their family. So
Mm.
I'm trying to help veterans with that, by whatever means. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really this is why I wanted to get involved and share the message because I think that's like I've spoken to many veterans. I've spoken to guys that haven't even been able to afford our treatment, let alone stem cell therapy.
Mm,
So I think it's a crucial thing to be doing, especially for the fact that you guys fought on behalf of us, on
yeah.
behalf of our governments, and for a 21-year-old kid, like you're a kid, you're a child still. Like 21 is, you're not even your cortex hasn't even developed fully yet, and you're out there like making decisions and going through selection and destroying your body and your brain and depriving yourself of all the normal things a 21-year-old does, which is have girlfriends and do athletics and go to the gym and hang out with his mates. And you don't do all that. You don't get to do all that. And so after the fact, to leave you, at 30 years old, broken and essentially disabled and on the verge of death and just say, well, good luck, mate, is
Yeah.
the wrong thing to do.
Good
It's
good luck out there. Like the medical side, Jesus Christ, man. They're like, yeah, there's no support, which is why I'm doing it for, I'm going to start with the five primary militaries that we serve together.
yeah,
They call them Five Eyes, which is like America, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and like, really try to get those guys the treatment that they deserve. Like imagine
absolutely.
because they measure the quality of life for these guys in suicide. You're like, the stats in suicide. They don't measure the quality of life by any other measure, but some guy can't pick up their kid or is just literally mentally broken. Just like and so what we wait until they finally get to the point of taking their own life that we measure that as a failure. I think definitely failed well before that. And obviously, Veterans Affairs and all that are pretty slow at adjusting to anything and don't really want to take responsibility So we have to do this through like sort of private charity at this point. But
Yeah.
but and the other thing I like about that is it's going to eventually get the cost of stem cells down way lower.
Yeah.
Because there'll be, once the military starts pumping numbers through, because eventually they'll have to, especially the US military, it'll just make it more like the T model Ford, where because it's done in bulk, it can the price will be less. But in the meantime, it's like it's not covered by insurance, so we're all paying the price of medicine. But it's advanced medicine, it's advanced technology, right? It's just and for the guys like me, it's like if you need it, you're kind of without a choice. And it's fine. I made that sacrifice. As I said, the greatest financial decision I've ever made in my life. Greatest investment I've ever made. I don't think there'll ever be a better investment. I can't. How the hell do you put a price on your health, your happiness, your peace of mind, your comfort, quality of life? And how the hell do you earn when you're broken? I couldn't. I don't know anyone like I tried to, but it was pointless. Be like 2 steps forward, and that'll definitely put me 5 steps back because you don't have the energy to contribute to that. So, and then then you're in a worse state. You're in a greater state of not being able to earn. Yeah.
There are probably people here that have never heard of stem cells before that are going to watch this, or they're watching it now, and that's fine because you hadn't, and you needed that initial seed, and then it took you another 18 months to 2 years to finally take the leap and do it, right? So, um, I'm planning to come to Colombia and do stem cells for myself. I have a pretty serious shoulder injury after 2 decades of martial arts, and I'd love to not have to do surgery because I don't want to have plastic anchors and bits in my shoulder for the rest of my life. I'd love to let it heal on its own, so to regrow that tissue. So I'm definitely planning a trip. But why? From my reading and from my research, it's almost pointless to do it here in Australia. It's pointless to try and do it in the US. Um, People are traveling. Like I posted a 60-minute story in the group the other day of a lady who had to fly to Russia, and she had MS. She was wheelchair bound. She went to Canberra Hospital. Canberra Hospital took 6 months to make a decision. They started the process and then cut it halfway through and said, "We can't finish it. Good luck." And she went, and then no other hospital would actually take her on as a patient, which is, I think, unethical.
Also cowardice.
Cowardice. I think it's unethical. So
Yeah.
she took $100,000 of her own money, her and her husband, and she flew to Russia in this case, and she did stem cell therapy. And 6 months later, she was running, exercising 5 days a week, and she was doing Pilates and no more wheelchairs. Like, she literally saved her life.
Yeah.
So where you are in Colombia, in Medellin, like, it seems to be a big community of people that are going there for stem cells. Why are they coming there?
They're coming to Colombia because, to be honest, like, I guess you could say Eastern medicine is like holistic. Western medicine, which North America and whatnot, Britain, Europe, whatnot, is more like triage medicine or pharmaceuticals. I can say South America is leading the way in regenerative medicines, right? They're like brave enough to see this. They don't have the conflicts with pharmaceutical companies and organizations like they do in America and whatnot. So America is extremely slow in this. So the difference is in Latin America, you've got the best doctors and professors and studies and clinical trials and things going on here with the quantities that they need to give it a significant clinical study. They're leading the way, and they have been leading the way. They're like, to be honest, they're like, they're probably 8 years ahead. Anyone else, maybe 12 in some cases. Okay, one of the clinics there is, got a grant 12 years ago to study this, and they've been treating for 10 years, but they're doing in obvious numbers. Like in America, if you're paying for like full body or whatnot, not only it would cost you probably like 85,000, but it would be like, you'd be looking at about 5 million stem cells or so, some ballpark like that, maybe a million each injury or whatever. Whereas in Colombia, you're looking at 120 million stem cells in an IV, 200 million in IV, or 300 million in IV.
For a fraction of that price.
Oh yeah, significantly. Like, you'll be literally under a quarter, or for if you were to do the top treatment, and then you can get 50 million in each shoulder, in your both each knee, wherever. Like, it's an obvious sizable difference, and the clinical trials show that the numbers correlate to success, you know. And then obviously, there's a point there where it's like, hey, you're taking a lot. Let's break it down into two treatment protocols, depending what you've got. Like some people are just in and out in one day. Like literally in like, they go in there, they're in and they're out of the whole process in like maybe 2 hours, and you're like, oh, okay. But they probably, if you've got autoimmunity or certain treatments, they have different protocols. And because Latin America has been leading the way in this, and and they're not against correlating data from any other successful trial internationally as well. All right, like they're proper, very competent doctors, but they also care, and I guess they're also, you know, doing their duty, rather than worrying about originally who someone had to go pretty bravely go, you know what, I'm going to give this a try.
Yeah.
At the expense of my medical career, and it works. So I guess they're more capable of of striving for medical success to help their fellow human beings. Any of the doctors that I've met down here are definitely far more aligned with helping people than they are about making money. There's different characteristics, compared to America, which is literally about cashing out.
Well, I've been really impressed with the process for myself, because it's not as if like nobody's trying to sell you something. In fact, if the treatment isn't for you, they'll, like, I've had to sending all of my scans, which have been ultrasound, MR arthrograms, CT scans, any blood tests that I've done, pretty much everything that I could come up with, and send it to the labs over there for the doctors to review and to say, hey, this will work and this won't, and this is what you need. And that's done by a medical doctor who's taken an oath, not by a it's a very, I feel, well taken care of.
They're down the line, man. They're like, in a sense of like, they're like, they will tell you bluntly, they're like, no, we don't think we'll have any success with that. And if that person wants to still give it a go, they can. But that, they'll tell you, they'll be like, like, well, we try to, might try to find another route or something like that. So, they'll pretty much, you tell them all your injuries, they'll develop a protocol for you, and then you can pretty much choose from that the things that are most important to you to, to get treated. But yeah, in many cases, they'll be like, no, we have, you can try. Sometimes they'll just blatantly be like, no, we're not taking that because we know stem cells don't help this. Okay. Sometimes they'll be like, you can try, but we have no clinical evidence that has been correlated on this particular matter to tell you that it's going to be successful or not. We believe it will be, but we can't guarantee anything. We're not going to guarantee anything. So I like that directness and that professionalism. That's one of the awesome parts. They're clearly not trying to make money out of you.
Yeah.
The staff are just, they're straight up, they're super professional.
Well, enough people need this treatment that we don't need to try to make money, right? I want to get to some of these comments before we continue. So Edith says, constant adrenaline and nervous system being stimulated and put on guard. I can't even imagine trying to maintain normalcy within your mind and body under all that stress. I assume the burnout and turnover is sizable. Absolutely. Then Carol here says, how goes it, brother, from another country? 30-30s, night blast, boat rides, barometric pressure changes, working biofarms, all fields, sandboxes, all the fun times.
Yeah. Like, it's something about putting yourself through the ringer, right, that catches up with you physically. So, like, a lot of people, I feel like, get it.
Someone, I don't know who, said Nico is a miracle. Pretty much. Stem cells are a miracle at this point.
Yeah. For me, Christ, man, I don't know how else to describe it. I when I talk to lads about it, I'm like, it's something godly, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Edith says, it's sad that this treatment is not more readily accepted and available. Our medical system really needs an overhaul, and our veterans deserve that top-notch treatment. Yeah, look, the way I'm thinking about it and we all justify things to ourselves in different ways, but the way I think about it is, okay, I'm going to spend, there's a few things that I want to target. One is my psoriasis, two, my gut, my shoulder. Those are the top kind of three priority. And the way I think about it is, what is the opportunity cost? How much will this cost me down the line if I don't do this treatment now? And really, when you really think about it, $10,000 to $20,000 for stem cell treatment is about the price of a second-hand Toyota Corolla. That's it. And and you're getting a second chance, and probably, and very probable that your chronic condition will be
Yeah.
cured.
So
Very probable.
one of the key elements here to focus on is when we go to the doctors, we think in terms of 50, 200 for a blood test, or MRI price and this and that, and what we get on our insurance and all this stuff. We've kind of like financially marginalized, those things, because really in a
But
way,
those aren't the solutions, Nico. Those
no,
are just the diagnostic tools. Like
I'm trying
I
to
got quoted $18,000 for a torn labrum. That's after I had paid for the appointment. I walked into the appointment in the surgeon's office, and it was $350 for that appointment. It was about 12 minutes long. And at the end, it was like, well, you can either do public, which is about an 18 months waiting list, or you can do private, and that's 18 grand.
Yep.
Oh, are you kidding me? $18,000 for an arthroscopy. And that's, there's a high chance of that injury recurring because my shoulder is less stable now.
Yeah, I remember a surgeon that wanted to fix my first injury in the Navy. I have an AC joint, not even mentioned in the list because the physical injuries aren't worth it.
Yeah.
But the AC joint's pretty, screwed up. I couldn't lift my arm above my head and all this stuff. Like, I basically torn 2 of the 3 ligaments in there to hold it together. And he's like, honestly, Nick, he's like, if you go into the surgery, and this was the best guy. Like, I think the Navy was paying him like $40K per surgery. He was the best guy. And he was just like, Nick, I'm too straight up. 50% chance it's going to get better, 50% not going to make it worse. You've got to decide, like, cool, let's just not throw that. Like, let's not gamble with that. But where I was going was we've marginalized the expenses because we're paying for triage. We're just paying for someone to stop the bleeding, putting a patch over the arm. We're really just we're holding ourselves together, right? We're not paying for any regeneration. That's not even consideration of the Western. We're just keeping you in the game until you die.
Pretty much.
The stem cells, you're looking at regeneration. Regeneration of your body, your mind, everything, rebalancing of throughout your system. So, for me, as I said, I'll be taking stem cells in the blood supply IV the rest of my life, like every year, every 2 years, as long as I can afford it. It's one of those things where it's like, across, I want my family to do it. Anyone I care about that I've seen, I want to do it. Like that I come across when I talk to people, like if they, sometimes people want to have a chat to me, I'm like, I can't implore you enough. I'm like, I don't know what you're, like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, man, but it's something else. And, Western medicine will take 5-10 years, maybe more. But if if you can wait out 5 or 10 years, which anyone who's listening on this is definitely not in that category. No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the reason why I'm talking about it, and there's probably people in the group wondering why, like, what's this whole stem cell thing? This is new to us. We've got 12,000 people in the group, another 10,000 on our email list, and this will probably reach about 20,000 people. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because I have had cases, even patients, where I have not been able to get them the results that I wanted to get them. Like, I do care about the outcome, and you're one of those cases. We got you results, but we didn't actually turn it around in the way that we really wanted to because you were so far in the hole, right? And there are, out of the 12,000 people in this group, there's probably 1,200 of them, I'd say about 10%, that are in a very similar situation. And so what we need to do with them is not ignore all the stuff that we do, the nutritional therapies, the supplementation, the lifestyle. Those things still need to change. So if you don't change those and you get stem cells done and then you just continue with a piss poor lifestyle, you're going to get sick again, and you're not going to make the most of your investment. You want to actually do all of it, right? So for those people, for those cases where you've had, say, I just got off the call right before you with a person who was inquiring about our treatment program, who had 20 years of gastrointestinal issues, 20 years, 2 decades. At what point do you decide that enough is enough and that this needs to be fixed? Me, I would have decided much sooner. I'm doing stem cell treatment because I know I don't have the best genes in the world. I have a tendency towards autoimmune. I demand a lot of myself, and I want to live a long and happy life that's pain-free. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to invest in that, plus I'm going to take the supplements, plus I'm going to make your dietary changes, plus I'm going to do all the exercise. I'm going to do all of it. I'm going to do all of it because I want to give myself the absolute best chance, right? So there are people here that are in that. I know that they think in a very similar way. Like Edith is one of our patients. She thinks in a very similar fashion. I want to give myself the best chance. So if you're listening to this and it's been decades and you don't see a way out, this could potentially and very likely be your saving grace. And we're not saying that from a place of like nobody's benefited. Like it's not, we're not saying that from a place of, oh, it's going to help me. That this treatment will be out there and it will be available. But if you need to get fixed now and you've had enough, you should really start considering flying to South America, taking some time off of work or taking a couple of weeks and doing stem cell treatment.
Yeah,
Carol,
I concur from a holistic point of view as well. Completely. I did that, like, because it's like you got to stay the course and remain disciplined, right?
Yeah.
There are a few things post stem cells that don't really help the stem cells do their job, and you want to give them the best job they possibly can. So someone who's actually not exercising for like
resting.
After the first week, I was allowed to go for a walk. 2 weeks, I was allowed to like pick up light weights, so on and so on, and really just not overdo it. But I was also required for like to stay away from milk, because the milk proteins damage the stem cells. You let these get into your body and thrive, they continue to heal and regenerate for the rest of your life.
What's the first step that people need to take, Nico? Like right now, if somebody's listening to this, like, who do I speak to? Who did you speak to, and how would we direct them to the right place? I mean, we've built, actually, I ask you a question that I could definitely answer. I built a form. I built a little a quiz for people to take and to see if they are the right fit for stem cell treatment. So what I'll do, I'll post it in the comment section. And because this is my audience and I've built it into a trusted community, you can go directly through me. So we'll go through the form. We'll let you know. We'll say, hey, this makes sense. And then we'll take you to the next step and you can speak to the doctors and send in your results and see whether it's a good fit for you. But also if it's not a good fit, if the application doesn't make sense, I'll personally let you know as well. I'll send you an email, I'll get on a call and I'll let you know.
I like that sort of tiered gate there where it's, and it's another thing is there is a lot of people seeking this. So it's like, if you sit there and you're just checking it out or whatever, just be cognizant of the doctors and medical professionals' time, right? There's only so many patients they can see a day and review cases and whatnot. They're specialists in this field. So it's like, just be somewhat concerned with their time. So if you're going to go down this path, give it full conviction.
Yeah. I've posted the link in the comment section, guys. So if this resonates with you and it's something that you'd be interested in, fill out the form. It should take you no more than 60 seconds, max 2 minutes. And once you've done that, you will hear directly from me and we'll take you to the next step. But yeah, this is something that I think a lot of people need. I think a lot of people need it. And I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of our patients, which is why I wanted to have you on, and which is why I'm kind of pushing to educate the people, because it's going to be a game changer for me in my life and for my family's life. Like I want to get my mom to do it. She's a former cancer patient. I want to have, I want to get it out there.
I want my stepmother to do it. She's had cancer. Cross, I would like my mother to do it, my father to do it, just because I would like them to live that extra 10 years. Straight up. Like, and prevention is better than cure. I'd much rather take this now. And like, honestly, as far as I see it, I'd be taking this rest of my life to prevent chronic illnesses, as opposed to now as what I did in the past, where I just received them. It was like reactive, rather be proactive. But it's, it's like, this will be common in about 10 years, maybe even 20, if the pharmaceutical industry has any ability to really slow that down.
Yeah.
Because it's not really in their interest unless they own the field. So, it will eventually become just common. Like, you'll just go to your doctors and do this once or twice a year. It'll become normal. And it'll be that prevention is cure. Prevention is better than cure. Like, I mean, even we were saying before, when you're talking about like, genetics, I think it was genetics you said, where you like genes, you didn't have the best genes. It's like, well, but in the Western society now, we live on the 110% for the average person. Like the hunter and gatherer would, pretty much sleep most hours of the night, do a lot of resting and laying around. And we really live on the very threshold of our capacity, no matter what your genes give you. It's we live it on the edge, so we're just destroying ourselves, and then only once we're destroyed do we try to fix it.
Absolutely, yeah. Man, that was a really powerful story. I hope people. I'm really going to push for people to watch this one, and like for perspective, I really wanted people to understand going from the absolute elite. Like think about the best athlete you can think of, and then take it to the next level with dire consequences. It's not about losing a game. It's not about getting the ball in the hoop. It's about literally life or death, and not just for the people, for yourself and the people in the regiment, but potentially for a whole country, right? Entire country. Like we're talking millions of people. So take that, guys. Take that. Operating at that level, at that capacity, to then being 60 days away from death, and then now having a second chance at actually doing something with your life again. That was the path. That's what's happened here.
Yeah, the quality of life is the win.
Yeah.
If it's your goal to have your life back, can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, Nico. And man, thank you. Thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for your service. I'm sure I can say that on behalf of many people. You deserve the treatment. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy to see you, like from a friend to a friend. I'm really happy to see you because I really appreciate our time together and our conversation. So it makes me happy. So I'll be getting the message out there.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. But hey, man, you deserve it too.
We all do.
You're right.
All right, my man. We'll talk soon.
See you, brother. Ciao.
See you guys. Bye bye.